We're going to go over a really quick and easy tutorial in Photoshop today discussing how we can create effects just like this one, which is the double exposure effect. It's really easy, it's deceptively simple, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So as you can see here, I have two images which are superimposed on top of each other. And like we discussed in class today, this effect is known as a double exposure. Now you can create this effect in your camera if you're using a film camera, but it's also extremely easy to create in Photoshop, even if you're a Photoshop newbie. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and make sure that we have Photoshop launched as we do here. And we're gonna go to File and we're gonna navigate to Open, because what we would like to do is go ahead and open the first image that we're gonna be using in our double exposure. All right, and when that happens, you're gonna get this dialog box here. It's gonna allow you to navigate on your computer to wherever it is you have your image saved. I have mine saved in my SVC demo folder. And so I'm gonna just go ahead through and navigate to where I have that image. All right, so I've got that image right here selected and ready to go. And I'm gonna go ahead and press my open button. And it's gonna open my image up in Photoshop. So you can see that Photoshop will open a new tab just like a browser will every time you open up a new file. So now that I have my file open, I can zoom in on it by pressing Command plus. I can zoom out by pressing Command minus or Control if you're on a PC. And if I want to see the image just at the full screen, not cropped at all, I'm going to press Command 0. All right, so I can see my image here. And what I need to do is I need to take my selfie here and I want to isolate myself from my background. That's going to make it much easier to create this double exposure effect. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to need to make sure that I have my selection tool chosen. So if I navigate over to my toolbar, which is on the left-hand side of my screen, you can see that about 4 tools down, I have a little option that has a little flyout window. So if yours looks a little different, it could be that you have a different version of this tool selected, but this is my selection tool. And you can see I have a couple of different options here. I just want to make sure that I have the tool chosen. And once I have it chosen, you'll see that my options bar, which is this bar right up here at the top of my screen, that's going to change. Depending on what tool you have selected in Photoshop, that options bar is going to give you all the different things that that tool will allow. So once I have my selection tool chosen, I'm going to go up to my options bar and I'm going to choose this button right here called Select Subject. This is pretty awesome in the new version of Photoshop. It will actually go through your image and make a selection for you. Now, depending on your image, if you have a very complicated background or a complicated image, sometimes the selection isn't as great, but we're going to give it a shot and see how it does. All right, and so once I've clicked that button, you can see that now I have these marching ants, which are called a jogging line, that are kind of marching around my selection. So that's telling me what I have isolated in this selection. Now, if you chose this and for some reason you weren't happy with the selection, maybe it picked something you didn't want, or maybe it didn't pick something that you needed, you can refine the tool. So right now I have my selection tool chosen and I can click to add to the selection, right? So now it's got the whole thing selected. And if I want to get rid of something, I can just hold down my Option key if I'm on a Mac or the Alt key if I'm on a PC. And I can just paint out what I don't want. Now, if you have a very big selection tool like I do, you can always resize it by using your bracket keys. And that's the keys that are directly beside the P key on your keyboard. So the one on the left will make it smaller, the one on the right will make it bigger, and that can save you a lot of time. So once you've noodled around with your selection and you're happy with it, we're going to go ahead back up to the options bar, and we're going to press the select and mask option. And this is going to open up a new dialog box. And this is where we can make further changes to our selection. You'll see that there's a lot of cool options here in this window. There's some options at the top, and then over on the right, we also have some sliders that I encourage you guys to play with to get the selection exactly how you want it. The button that I'm most interested in is this one right here called the Refine Edge tool. And just like we talked about, you can use your bracket tools to change the size, and you can just kind of click and paint to change the selection. And so if you're not happy with something, remember you can always paint it back in or paint it out, and just gives you an option to kind of get rid of what you don't want or add back in what you might want. If you're happy with the select subject tool, exactly how it worked, and you don't need to make any changes, all you have to do now is come down to the bottom right corner and click on the OK button. And that's going to go ahead and save whatever changes you've made to that selection. Alrighty, so we are back in Photoshop now. We can see that we have our marching ants that have made the selection that we want to use. And the next step that we're going to do is we want to get rid of that background, right? We want to just hide it so that all we can see is the subject that we've selected. And in order to do that, we're going to use what's called a layer mask. So if you take a look at your layers panel, which is over here on the right side of your screen, if you come all the way down to the bottom, we've got some buttons down here that'll allow us to make some changes. And the one that we're going to choose is this one right here. It looks like a black circle inside of a white rectangle, and this is our mask tool. So when I click on the mask tool, what's going to happen is you'll see that in my layers panel now, I have my actual image, which is my selfie, and then beside it, I have this mask. And so I haven't deleted the background, I've just hidden it. And so that means that I can now start to make some additional changes to get this double exposure effect that I'm going for. All right, so the next step that we want to add is we want to actually add another layer with a solid color background, because right now we've got this little checkerboard, which means that it's transparent, and that's not really what we want. We want to make sure that we have a solid color. So in order to add another layer that's a solid color background, we're going to come down here to our layers panel at the very bottom, and to the button that's just to the right of our mask tool, there's another little button that looks like a circle that's half black and half white. If we click on this, this is the create a new fill or a new adjustment layer. If we click on it, you're going to get this flyout menu that's going to give you a bunch of options, but we just need this top option here, solid color. When I click on solid color, my screen's going to go black for a minute. Don't panic. It's okay. I'm going to get this color picker and I can navigate through and choose a color. Now, the color that's going to give us the best effect for a double exposure is going to be a solid white background. So I'm just going to click and drag my slider all the way up to the top left corner so that I have my white selected, and I'm going to press OK. And now I go back to my screen and you're probably thinking, what the what? My image is gone. Don't worry. What we're looking at is an example of layers. And if you're not used to working in Photoshop, it can kind of be a little freaky. So let's talk about it for just a second. Whenever we're thinking about layers in Photoshop, this is our layers panel, think about it as looking top down. And so whatever's at the top, like if we're looking at a deck of cards, whatever card is on the top, that's the card that we can see. And what we want to do is we want to rearrange our layers. And the cool thing is Photoshop makes that pretty easy. So if I want to move my layer that I just created, this color fill, all I have to do is click on that layer, right? And if you can see which one I have selected because it turns kind of a light gray when I click on it, I'm going to click on that color fill layer and I'm just going to drag it down underneath my top layer. And now you can see that I have my selfie on the top and I've got my color fill on the bottom. So speaking of layers and layer management, this is a good time to go ahead and start renaming our layers. We want to make sure that as we're working in a way so we know where we are in our document, and it helps when you start to have a lot of layers to make sure that they're named things that you're going to remember. Renaming layers is exceedingly easy. All you have to do is double click on the layer name and it highlights it. And then you can just type in what you want to call it. So I'm going to call my selfie layer selfie. And I'm going to call my white layer BG for background. All right. And now that I've made these changes, I also want to make sure that I'm saving as I'm working. Nothing's worse than working really, really hard on a document and then all of a sudden the computer crashes or the power goes out and you lose all your progress. So we're going to make sure that we're saving. And in order to save, we're going to go up to File, or we can press Command S or Control S if you're on a PC. We're going to come down to the Save option. And it's going to open up a dialog box and it's going to say, all right, well, where do you want to save this file and what would you like to call it? So I'm going to leave mine in the same folder, that SVC demo, but I'm going to rename it to my name. So Zerby Comer and double, just so that I'm following the directions on the assignment sheet. And we're going to leave the file type just as it is because we want to make sure we can continue to edit and adjust this as we work. All right, now I'm going to press save. And so I've saved my progress. So we've got through the hard part. Now comes the fun part. We've got one image that's prepped and ready to go. And now it's time to bring in our other image so we can create this double exposure effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to File and Open, and I'm going to navigate to the image that I'd like to use with this. And so I've got a bunch of images saved here, and I've got some cool ones of some trees and stuff. And so I'm going to find one that I want to use. How about this one? And I'm going to press Open. And just like we saw before, every time you open a new file in Photoshop, it's going to put a new tab in your Photoshop file so I can navigate through the tabs that I have open. So I want to make sure that I have the tab open for the image that I just selected, right? This image of trees. And what I want to do is I want to select this image and I want to copy it and paste it into my other tab so that I can work on it as a separate layer and start to get that effect. Now, this is actually really easy to do. We're going to be using some of the same hotkeys and tools that you would use, just like if you were working in a Word document and you were trying to copy and paste a paragraph. So the first thing I need to do is select the image. And the easiest way to do that is to press Command A for all, right? And it's going to give me these marching ants all the way around my file, right? I can see them right there. Once I have that selected, again, that was Command A as in all, I'm going to press Command C to copy, right? So now I have the whole thing selected and I've copied it by pressing Command C. And the next step is going to be to pop back over to my document. And here what I want to do is I want to press Command V as in Victor to paste it. So I'm going to press Command V and da 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 da. I have my tree layer now set into my new document. And it comes in and it calls it layer number 1. Now, if it's not the right size or it's not the position you want it, don't fret. We're going to figure that out in just a second. But because we're practicing good layer management, we're going to make sure that we click on layer number 1 and we rename it. I'm going to call this one trees. Now you can see that this is a much, much zoomed in version versus this version, right? You can see I'm way, way zoomed in. And so it's probably too big for the canvas that I'm working on, and I want to resize it. The easiest way to resize something is with the Command T option. Command T will open up a bounding box that's the transform tool. And what's cool about this is you can click and drag and move this around, and you can see that I'm making it smaller or bigger. I can click and move it to change the position. And I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit so I can show you how much larger this file is than the selfie that I took. So I'm just going to click to drag it and make it a little bit smaller so that it fits on my document, maybe something like that. And I can move it all around. Now, if I want to rotate it, I can just park my mouse over one of the 4 corners and see how it gives me a little curly mouse. I can rotate it and move it and change the position. But sometimes people find that it's kind of hard to figure out where you want to put this if you can't see the picture underneath, right? If we can't see what's underneath this layer. The easiest way to change that is to come back over to our layers panel, and you'll see this little option that says opacity. I'm going to click that option and I'm going to bring the opacity down. So now I can see where the trees are and I can see my face underneath. So I can make kind of an informed decision about where I want that to be positioned. The other thing that comes up often is sometimes you want to flip something around, right? Like maybe I want all this tree detail to be over here on the other side. An easy way to do that is to just control click on the image, and it gives me this little flyout menu. And down here at the bottom, I have some options to flip it horizontally, and I can also flip it vertically. So I can start to make some changes there. All right, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, maybe something like this. And when I'm happy with it, I'm just going to press the return key and zoom back in. And so now I can see kind of an example of what this might look like as a double exposure. But we also want to use the blending modes. These are the ways that we can take the 2 different layers and merge them together to give them more of that double exposure look that we're used to seeing in some of those images. So I'm going to turn my opacity all the way back up, right? And I know that I've got my other layers underneath here. And what I need to do now is over here in my layers panel where it says normal, I'm going to click and you can see I have this drop down menu. These are my blending modes. So I'm going to go through here and kind of start to see how, as I navigate through, you can start to see some really cool effects. My advice to you is to play around with these, see which ones you like or you don't like. I often find that lighten and screen give the best results for these sorts of effects, but it just depends. You might really decide, soft light is what you're going for, or maybe you really like the difference or the luminosity. So choose which one you like. I'm gonna go with lighten here. And once we're happy with it, we have now successfully created a double exposure by taking 2 different images, different blending modes, and working with masking. We've been able to put images together to create this cool effect. When we're happy with it, we're going to press Command S to save our progress. And then the last step is we want to make sure that we save a version of this file that we can share, right? So we have our Photoshop document that we can come back and edit, but we want to have a compressed JPEG that we can email out, that we can put on our Instagram, that we can share on social media. The easiest way to do that is go to File, and instead of choosing Save, we're going to choose Save a Copy because we want to make another version of this file that we can share. That's going to open up a dialog box here, and the only thing that we need to do is we need to come down to this option that says Format, and we're going to navigate down and choose JPEG. And so you can see it changes our file type to a JPEG, and we press Save. And now we are all done. Congratulations, you have successfully made a double exposure image. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll see you guys in class. Thanks. Bye.